The first thing anyone noticed about Blackwood was the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence you'd find on a snowy night, nor the comforting hush of a countryside road. This was a heavy, suffocating quiet that seemed to press against your chest the moment you stepped past the crooked wooden sign at the edge of town. The sign itself was barely legible, half swallowed by moss. Welcome to Blackwood. Population 1,142. Though no one had bothered to update the number in decades. Some claimed there were fewer than 500 left. Others whispered that no one kept count anymore because too many names were disappearing, swallowed by the forest that loomed over the town like a shadow that never moved. It was dusk when Evelyn Carter first drove down the winding dirt road into Blackwood. The sky burned a strange amber hue, clouds stretching long and thin as though pulled apart by unseen hands. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her eyes flicking between the road and the dense tree line. She was not supposed to be here. But the letter had been clear. A single sheet of aged parchment had arrived at her Boston apartment 2 weeks earlier, unmarked, and signed, carrying only one message in neat cursive handwriting. When the eclipse comes, return to Blackwood. The truth waits. She had almost thrown it away. Almost. But Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who ignored the past, no matter how much it hurt. Blackwood was where she was born. Blackwood was where her parents had died. Blackwood was the place she had sworn never to return to. Yet here she was. The moment her tires crunched onto the cracked asphalt of the main street, Evelyn felt a strange weight in the air, like static before a storm. She slowed, peering out at the town she hadn't seen in 20 years. Shuttered windows. Shops with faded signs. A gas station that looked abandoned but still had its lights humming weakly. A stray dog crossed the road, its fur matted, its eyes glowing in the fading light as though. Evelyn pulled up to the inn, if it could still be called that. The Hollow Pines Inn was the only place visitors ever stayed, though visitors were rare. Its once charming white paint had peeled away to expose gray wood beneath. The sign creaked in the wind, a single lantern swinging from the porch, its flame trembling though there was no breeze. Inside, the air was thick with dust. The lobby smelled faintly of iron and mildew. Behind the counter sat a man Evelyn didn't recognize, though his eyes held the unmistakable Blackwood hollowness, a tired, resigned look, as if he had seen too much and expected to see more. "You're Carter," he said without greeting. Evelyn froze. "Excuse me?" "The Carter girl. I knew you'd come back. They always come back." Something in his tone made her skin crawl. She took the brass key he slid across the counter without another word and made her way up the stairs, the wood groaning beneath her boots. As she reached the second floor, she noticed the wallpaper peeling back in strips. Carved beneath the layers of faded floral design were symbols, circles, runes, things that looked like eyes staring from the walls themselves. Her room was small but livable. A single bed, a cracked mirror, and a window overlooking the forest. From here, the Blackwood tree line seemed endless. That's when she noticed it. The lanterns. Scattered along the forest's edge were a dozen faint, flickering lights. At first, Evelyn thought they were fireflies. But no, they burned steady, unnatural, lined up in deliberate rows. Lanterns, swaying gently, though no one stood near them. As the last of the daylight bled away, the lanterns grew brighter. And from somewhere deep in the woods came the sound of whispers. Evelyn stumbled back from the window, her pulse hammering. The whispers rose and fell like a chant, carried by the wind, though no words could be made out. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the sound seemed to bypass her entirely, resonating inside her SK. And then, just as suddenly, they stopped. The room fell into silence. But that silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. Evelyn backed away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter again, staring at the single phrase written in elegant ink. "When the eclipse comes, return to Blackwood. The truth waits." Her eyes lifted to the calendar nailed to the wall. Tomorrow's date had been circled in black ink. And beneath it, scrawled in the same handwriting. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Evelyn tossed and turned on the creaking bed, every shadow in the room seeming alive. The sound of the whispers lingered long after they had stopped, as though the silence was mocking her. At some point, she must have drifted off, because she awoke with a start to a soft tapping at the window. Her heart seized. Slowly, she turned her head. The lanterns were still there, glowing faintly at the tree line. But closer now. She was certain they had been farther away when she'd first seen them. Now they seemed only a few yards from the inn's edge. Tap. 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 The sound continued, rhythmic, like fingernails against the glass. Evelyn forced herself to sit up, every muscle tight. She reached for the lamp by the bed, but before her fingers touched the switch, the tapping stopped. The room sank back into silence. She stayed frozen for several minutes before finally daring to peek through the window. Nothing. Only the endless black forest, stretching far, swallowing all light except for those pale lanterns. When dawn broke, the forest looked almost normal again. Mist drifted between the trees, and the lanterns had vanished. For a moment, Evelyn allowed herself to believe it had all been some trick of exhaustion. But the scratches on the outside of the glass told her otherwise, 3 long vertical marks, etched deep as if carved by something with claws. Evelyn forced herself downstairs. The inn's dine-in. She sat at a corner table, pulling her coat tighter, but it didn't help with the feeling of exposure. After several long minutes, the innkeeper approached, placing a chipped mug in front of her. "You shouldn't have come back," he said simply. Evelyn lifted her gaze. "Do I know you?" He shook his head, lips pressed thin. "Doesn't matter. I know you. Everyone knows the Carters. You were the last to leave, weren't you? After the fire?" The word struck her like a blow. The fire. 20 years had passed, but the memory still rose in vivid fragments, the glow of flames licking at the night sky, the stench of smoke, the screams, her parents' voices, cut off too soon. She had been only 8. "I don't want to talk about that," she muttered. The innkeeper didn't argue. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The eclipse is tomorrow. You'd best be gone before then." Evelyn's stomach nodded. "What happens during the eclipse?" His expression darkened. "You don't want to know." Later that morning, Evelyn walked the town's main street. The air was unnaturally still, even the birds seemed absent. Shops stood half-empty, faces peeking through curtains as she passed. Blackwood had always been strange, but this was different, like the entire town was holding its breath. As she neared the church at the center of town, she stopped. The building leaned heavily to one side, its bell tower cracked. But more disturbing were the symbols etched into the wood above the door, the same circular runes she had seen beneath the wallpaper in her room. They looked older than the church itself, carved deep, as though burned into the structure. The heavy doors creaked open. An old woman stepped out, her frame bent, her eyes clouded with cataracts but sharp in their focus. She wore a black shawl that fluttered in the faint breeze. "You," the woman rasped. "The Carter girl." Evelyn stiffened. "Everyone keeps saying that." "Of course they do. Blood remembers blood." The woman's thin lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. "You've heard them already, haven't you? The voices in the forest?" Evelyn's skin prickled. "What are they?" The woman tilted her head, listening to something Evelyn could not hear. Then she whispered, "Not what? Who?" Before Evelyn could press her, the woman shuffled past and vanished into the alley, leaving behind only the faint smell of ash. That evening, Evelyn sat at the window of her room again, staring out toward the woods. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't stop herself. And there they were. The lanterns. closer than the night before. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, her breath fogging it. There was something wrong with the lights themselves, too steady, too pale, as if they weren't fueled by flame but by something else entirely. Something alive. Then she saw movement. Figures. Shapes gliding between the trees, tall and thin, their limbs elongated, their movements jerky yet deliberate. They did not carry the lanterns. The lanterns floated beside them, swaying as though tethered to their presence. One of the figures stopped. Slowly, it turned its head toward the inn. Toward her. Her heart seized. The figure had no face. Only a smooth, blank surface, pale as the lanterns themselves. Yet she felt its gaze like a physical weight pressing against her chest. Evelyn stumbled back, slamming the curtains shut, her breath ragged. She collapsed onto the bed, clutching the letter with trembling hands. The truth waits. What truth? What did her family have to do with this cursed town? Sleep eventually dragged her under again, though it brought no peace. She dreamed of fire and whispers, of faceless figures circling her bed, chanting in voices that were not voices but echoes of the dead. When she awoke, her calendar caught her eye once more. The circle around tomorrow's date seemed darker now, as though the ink had bled and spread across the page on its own. Tomorrow was the eclipse. And Evelyn Carter would finally learn the truth of Blackwood. Morning broke gray and heavy, as though the sky itself knew what was coming. Evelyn Carter stepped out of the inn and was greeted by silence. The town square, usually quiet but functional, was deserted. Only the wind stirred, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. She walked slowly, her boots crunching against the frost-hardened ground. Every door she passed was shut tight, curtains drawn. The town felt abandoned, but she knew she was being watched. Behind every shuttered window, unseen eyes followed her every step. At the heart of the square stood the old church. Today, its crooked bell tower seemed even more sinister. A faint sound drifted from within, low voices chanting, rising and falling in rhythm. Evelyn froze. Curiosity warred with dread, but her feet betrayed her. They carried her up the stone steps, closer to the heavy wooden doors. She pressed her ear to the gap. The voices were clearer now, a strange language that clawed at her thoughts, pulling at her sanity. Suddenly, the chanting stopped. Evelyn stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. The doors creaked open on their own, revealing only darkness inside. A figure appeared, the old woman from before, her shawl dragging along the floor. Her clouded eyes fixed on Evelyn. "You came," the woman whispered. "You can't run from it, child. The blood calls." Evelyn steadied herself. "What's happening here? What are you people doing?" The woman gave a dry, hollow laugh. "What we've always done. What must be done. You'll see soon enough. Tonight, we gather." "Gather for what?" Evelyn pressed. The old woman's expression turned solemn. "For the eclipse. For the return." Before Evelyn could demand answers, the doors slammed shut, nearly catching her arm. She wandered the outskirts of town, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. The trees loomed tall, skeletal against the gray sky. But something about the forest felt wrong today. The air was heavy, oppressive, as though the woods themselves were 274. That's when she heard it, children's laughter. It drifted through the mist, sweet and melodic, but impossible. There were no children here, not anymore. Against her better judgment, she followed the sound deeper into the trees. The laughter grew louder, circling her, though she saw no one. Then the mist parted, and she saw it, a small clearing, at its center a stone circle half buried in moss. Strange runes, identical to the ones carved into the church, glowed faintly on their surfaces. And there, standing among them, were the children. At least, they looked like children. Pale skin, wide eyes too dark, smiles stretched too far. They giggled and waved at her, their voices overlapping in eerie harmony. "Come play, Evelyn. Stay with us forever. We've been waiting." Her blood froze. "How do you know my name?" The children's smiles widened, and their voices merged into one. "Because you never left." Suddenly their forms shimmered, flickering like candle flames. Their faces melted, revealing hollow eye sockets and gaping mouths. They lunged toward her with inhuman shrieks. Evelyn screamed and stumbled back, running blindly through the forest until she burst into daylight once more. By the time she returned to town, her lungs burned and her legs shook. She didn't care if anyone saw her panic, she needed answers. She stormed back into the inn, slamming her hands on the counter. The innkeeper jumped. "What are those things in the forest?" she demanded. His face paled. "You saw them. Don't play dumb with me. What are they?" He hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They're what's left of the ones who didn't make it. The ones taken during the last eclipse. They're trapped here, in the shadows. They can't leave, not until what?" He swallowed hard. "Not until the circle is broken." "The circle?" Evelyn asked, recalling the glowing runes on the stones. The innkeeper's gaze darted nervously to the windows. "Stop asking questions, girl. Curiosity will get you killed here." But Evelyn wasn't backing down. "My family lived here. My parents died here. You think I'm going to just walk away without knowing why?" The innkeeper's expression softened, almost pitying. "Your parents tried to stop it. That's why they burned. The fire wasn't an accident, Evelyn. It was punishment." The words hit her like ice water. For years she had believed it was tragedy, a cruel twist of fate. But now it sounded like something deliberate. Before she could respond, the church bell tolled. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound rattled through the streets like a warning. The innkeeper's face drained of color. "It's starting. The gathering." That night, Evelyn followed the townsfolk. Cloaked figures emerged from every corner, holding lanterns identical to those she'd seen in the forest. They moved silently through the streets, converging toward the church. Drawn by equal parts fear and determination, Evelyn joined the procession at a distance. Inside the church, the pews were gone, replaced by a massive circle of symbols carved into the floor. At the center stood a stone altar, blackened as though scorched by countless fires. The chanting began again, dozens of voices merging into one. The language twisted through Evelyn's mind, scraping against her thoughts. She pressed herself against the wall, trying not to be noticed. The old woman stood at the altar, arms raised. "The eclipse is upon us. Tonight, the circle will open. Tonight, he returns." The crowd roared in unison. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Then she saw it. Above the altar, a faint shimmer formed in the air, like heat rising from stone. Slowly, it thickened, darkened, until it became a rift, an open wound in reality itself. From within, whispers poured out, the same voices she had heard in her room.